Ladies and gentlemen, today we are going over 11 players that are absolutely catching fire at the perfect time for fantasy football, heading right into your fantasy football playoffs here in week 15 through 17. This video is brought to you by the Dolphins defense, getting me a nice 23 fantasy points to start out the week. Okay, it almost makes up for Charbonnet playing absolutely terrible, only getting 9.8 in PPR leagues, but I'm not going to complain. It could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse. Dolphins defense, thank you. I owe you one. And thank you to the Jets for tossing a Hail Mary going into halftime that led to a 99-yard interception return. I was absolutely jumping out of the seat. Without that, they only would have had 15 points for the defense. That's pathetic. All right, that's absolutely pathetic. Now, 23, I'm living lavish. Anyways, first player on this list today, we have Tank Dell. Tank Dell has been nothing short of spectacular over the last 3 weeks, averaging 25.8 PPR fantasy points, which is unbelievable, especially because in most leagues, this guy probably wasn't even drafted. If he was drafted, it was super, super late, one of the last rounds, and you got an absolute steal if you took the risk on this guy. He is now a top 20 wide receiver in fantasy football with easily top 10 upside for the rest of the season, the way CJ Stroud is playing. Tank Dell is super quick, and it seems like he is always open. The connection with Stroud is also undeniable right now. 11 targets, 14 targets, and 10 targets in his last 3 games, which is unbelievable volume. That is wide receiver 1 type volume. Now, I will say, he has scored in his last 3 games, at least once in each of those games. So I don't think we can count on that happening every single game for the rest of the year. But if we do take a look at the schedule ahead here, there are definitely some favorable matchups ahead. His schedule consists of the Jacksonville Jaguars. I would consider that a pretty simple matchup. Then we get the Denver Broncos. They've been playing stingy defense, so I don't know about that matchup. New York Jets, I don't know about that matchup either. The Tennessee Titans should be an easy one. Cleveland Browns, and then the Tennessee Titans once again, which is a good favorable matchup. So 2 out of the 3 games in the fantasy football playoffs, he plays a terrible passing defense in the Tennessee Titans. Now, I would say that's a pretty even split of good games versus bad games matchup-wise for him. But even in those matchups for Tank Dell, like I said, the way that CJ Stroud is playing right now and his connection with Dell is so on point. How are you going to be sitting Tank Dell in your fantasy football playoffs? If you do, you need to tell me why in the comment section below. We're moving on to Rachaad White, though. 5 straight games for Rachaad White, scoring over 15 PPR fantasy points. Honestly, I was a little bit worried at the beginning of the season. I can't deny it. I thought he was going to be, this guy could be a bust just because the offensive line was playing so bad. They weren't scoring too many points in the beginning of the season. But as the season has gone on, the Bucs have clearly figured out how to use him to his strengths. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm the farthest thing from worried at this point in the year. His yards per carry is not good. Let's just leave it at that, but it doesn't matter because he catches so many passes. Right now, White is top 5 in targets, receiving yards, receptions, and has the highest catch rate out of any running back in the NFL right now. And even though the Bucs are sitting at 4-6, they are just 1 game out of first place, believe it or not. The Saints are in first, and I believe the Falcons are also in first at 5-5. This should give them plenty of incentive to keep using White because he is dominating out of the backfield and he is an explosive playmaker that they need to keep using. At this point, I would also go as far to say that White is pretty much matchup proof because last week he played well, even against a super stingy San Francisco 49ers defense. We saw they gave Charbonnet and the Seahawks a lot of problems on Thursday night on Thanksgiving. Rest of the season schedule for Rachaad White consists of the Indianapolis Colts, Carolina Panthers, Atlanta Falcons, Green Bay Packers, Jacksonville Jaguars, and New Orleans Saints. Even against the good run defenses, his pass catching potential is just so high. There's another guy just like Tank Dell. I don't know how you can sit this guy with how hot he's been over the past couple of weeks. Next, we'll move on to Joe Mixon. Over the past 4 weeks, it feels like Mixon, he's just stepped it up. He has just been in another gear compared to the beginning of the year. Everything felt a little bit sluggish, but unfortunately, right when he does get going, Joe Burrow gets hurt. So that's going to put a damper on things. I do feel like this is going to be a much bigger problem for Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins when he eventually does come back, and then, of course, Tyler Boyd, rather than Joe Mixon, though, because Mixon is a great pass catcher, and Jake Browning clearly isn't at the level as Joe Burrow is when he's healthy. I mean, it's not even going to be a comparison here. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if we end up seeing a lot of dump offs to Mixon for the remainder of this season. Another aspect that I love about Mixon is that he's top 5 in red zone touches. So once they get down to that red zone inside the 20, he has a much higher chance than most running backs to get in there. Rest of the season, their schedule kind of mediocre. They play the Pittsburgh Steelers, Jacksonville Jaguars, Indianapolis Colts, Minnesota Vikings, Pittsburgh Steelers again, then the Kansas City Chiefs. So this is another guy where even if the D-line shows up on the opposing team and kind of shuts down the run game, Mixon catches enough passes out of the backfield where I would still be starting him at least as an RB2 rest of season. Now we got Michael Pittman Jr. I honestly debated throwing Pittman on here, but I did decide to do so because he is just so consistent. Over the last 5 games, he hasn't scored less than 14 PPR fantasy points. He regularly sees the most targets on this Colts team on a weekly basis, even when Josh Downs is healthy. And don't get me wrong, Josh Downs is an amazing player. I actually love watching Downs play, and I think he is going to be phenomenal in his career. Pittman's still the number 1 wide receiver on this Colts team. Also, Gardner Minshew is playing solid enough as a replacement to Anthony Richardson. You know, I kind of wondered myself, was there going to be a massive drop-off when Richardson went down and Minshew had to come in? But he's been a good replacement so far. And the rest of the season schedule for the Colts, they have some favorable matchups for wide receivers. They go against the Buccaneers, the Titans, Bengals, Steelers, Falcons, and the Raiders. So Michael Pittman still should be in your lineups as a wide receiver 2 or a flex play if you have a nice little stacked roster. Then we got Kyler Murray, 2 games back, and Kyler is already reminding people why he has never finished out of the top 12 in fantasy quarterbacks. Even though his supporting cast might not be up to par with the rest of the teams in the league, a lot of them that is, I know there's some bad teams out there, he's still got Hollywood Brown, who hasn't even gotten going yet. They haven't been on the same page for whatever reason. Trey McBride is emerging as one of the best tight ends in the league right now. And then we got a consistent James Conner at running back, always a reliable option. So this team can still do damage. Don't get them wrong. It's a matter of if they truly want to, because their record is so bad right now, and the playoffs are the furthest thing from what they are actually focused on at the moment. The real benefit to having Kyler shouldn't be surprising to anybody, by the way. It's his legs. The way he uses his legs is unbelievable. So far in 2 games that he's played, he is top 5 in carries per game and rushing yards per game at the quarterback position. That gives you a massive advantage. It puts him in the realm of players such as, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, even to a little bit lesser of a degree than those guys in real life potential. But in fantasy potential, Kyler Murray can score 30 at any given week. So that's why I feel like he has to be in your lineup if you have one of those guys that's not as consistent, like a Jalen Hurts or whoever we were just talking about there. The rest of the season schedule is also pretty favorable here. He goes up against the Rams, Steelers, 49ers, Bears, and the Philadelphia Eagles to end off the season. A lot of those teams give up a good amount of points to opposing quarterbacks, so we'll have to see what happens with Kyler Murray rest of the season. But right now, I'm feeling pretty confident in starting him. Next up, we move on to Jaylen Warren. I'll keep this one pretty short because we just talked about Warren in the last video. Matt Canada is finally gone, as we talked about. So hopefully they get Warren even more touches because he has been so efficient up to this point in time. He has over 14 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And if it's life or death, and I had to choose between either Najee Harris or Jaylen Warren, I think the decision is pretty simple. In my eyes, I'm picking Jaylen Warren every day of the week. He's one of the toughest runners to bring down in all of football right now. And the Steelers are really lacking any other offensive sparks. I mean, Deontay Johnson was playing well, but then these past 2 weeks, he's been almost irrelevant. George Pickens has just fallen off a cliff since the beginning of the season. Freiermuth hasn't done anything. So, not too many options on this Steelers team in terms of offense. But they take on the Bengals, the Cardinals, Patriots, Colts, Bengals again, and then the Seahawks rest of the season for fantasy football. Those are 5 easy matchups, and then finishing it off against a tough Seattle team against the run. Warren's hot streak right now should continue as long as the opportunities continue to present themselves, and hopefully the offensive coordinator will get Warren more touches. Then we move on to Jahmyr Gibbs. What the hell are you doing, Jahmyr Gibbs? Only 11.3 fantasy points in PPR leagues on Thanksgiving. Forget it. This guy's washed up. You can't start him anymore. All right, throw in the towel on this guy. He had 1 bad game. I'm done with him. No, but for real, earlier on in the season, this was one of his best weeks. So this being his floor right now at 11.3, you'll take that every day of the week. He didn't find the end zone or find any room in the passing game, which of course shot his value down this week. That won't be a trend, let me tell you right now. I will say it is slightly concerning, though, that the Lions have now had 2 games, once against the Ravens and then against the Packers here, where they can't get anything going on offense for the majority of the game. Last time was against a much better Ravens team, and they did actually end up scoring a good amount of fantasy points. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think Laporta had a decent day, and then I also think Amon-Ra St. Brown had a good day against the Ravens, but it was mostly in garbage time. Regardless, I do think Gibbs is still a top 10 running back rest of the season, even though Montgomery eats into his value quite a bit. In the perfect world for Jahmyr Gibbs owners, it would be a 75-25 split with Gibbs getting more of the work. It's not a fairy world here, okay? Both of these guys are going to get a lot of work. Monty is playing way too good for that to happen. Rest of the season, the schedule toughens up a bit for the Lions as well. They get the Saints, the Bears, who are actually very stingy against the run, the Broncos, who have been playing well, Minnesota, who's been playing well against the run, and then Dallas. So a very tough schedule rest of the season. I would still be starting Gibbs in almost every single league type, though. This guy could be a league winner if he keeps playing up to his standards. Not the 11.3, though. We can't be having any more of that, Gibbs. Next, we move on to Bijan Robinson. I swear to God, I swear, Arthur Smith, if this is just one big joke that you're playing on us, you gave us a bunch of touches against the Arizona Cardinals before their bye week. If that was a big joke, we're going to have a big problem. All right, Bijan got the most touches that he saw all year. He scored a ton of fantasy points, over 17, I believe it was. It's never been about his talent. It's been about the opportunities that Arthur Smith is willing to give him. And I have a question for you guys. Would you keep Bijan Robinson in a keeper league? Let's say you had players like, I'm trying to think of somebody very similar, like a Jonathan Taylor maybe, or a Jahmyr Gibbs, or a receiver-wise, what are we talking about? Maybe a CeeDee Lamb. Who would you rather have as a keeper? Because I'd probably rather have all of those players over Bijan Robinson, just for the pure fact that you don't know. If Arthur Smith is not there next year, we're having a totally different conversation. But if he is, how do you even know he's going to be used? All right, I can't trust Arthur Smith as far as I can throw him right now, and I can't lie to you, I probably couldn't even throw him a foot. So, it's very hard to trust him right now, although he ranks first in routes ran and route participation. Bijan, that is, not Arthur Smith, but yet barely sees any targets for some reason. I have no clue why they don't use him more in the passing game. He's really just a glorified decoy at this point, as Arthur Smith would say. The good news is that the playoff schedule for the Falcons is not bad at all for running backs. Panthers, Colts, and then actually Chicago, who has been tough of late against the run, but still very favorable heading into the playoffs. It's just a matter if he gets the touches, he will perform. Are you willing to take that risk? Because I think you don't really have a choice. Then we move on to Dalton Kincaid. He also had kind of a bummer game. Only 10.6 fantasy points last week. Will he bounce back? I think so. Now he goes up against a Philadelphia Eagles secondary who is much better against the run than they are against the pass, and they've given up a ton of fantasy points to tight ends earlier on in this season. And until we see how Dawson Knox is going to be used once he comes back from IR on this Bills team, I think you got to ride it out with Dalton Kincaid. Playoff schedule here is a bit tough, I can't lie, but he definitely can overcome this as long as Josh Allen keeps giving him enough looks. And for the love of God, Josh Allen, stop throwing picks. Try to feed the ball to Dalton Kincaid a little bit more, okay? And get on the same page with Stephon Diggs, please, because we drafted Diggs in so many best ball leagues. We need this guy to score some points. You can't go MIA at the end of the season when we desperately need you. Get on the same page, please. And Dalton Kincaid should be also still started in almost every league. Then we got Sam Howell. I gotta say right now, this dude, Sam Howell, is the absolute GOAT. Top 6 fantasy quarterback heading into week 12 is wild. All right. And then he goes out and puts up 17.3 against the Cowboys defense, who has held some teams to like 50 or 100 passing yards. He throws for 300 yards, I believe it was. Have to give him props. Even though they still got blown out of the water, I don't care, because for fantasy football purposes, he played, he got 17 plus fantasy points. I'll take that all day of the week. The thing is, rest of the season, I would say he's a viable option rest of the season, but the schedule is pretty brutal the rest of the way. I don't know if I'd feel too comfortable starting him against the Dolphins. They have a much improved defense with Ramsey back now. The Rams, that could be, an easy-ish matchup. The Jets, that's a tough one. And then the San Francisco 49ers also might be a tough matchup, even though their run defense is much better than their passing defense. Sam Howell, if you need a guy to plug in the lineup, I mean, maybe that Rams game and maybe the 49ers game, I would think about starting him, but I'd probably hold back against Miami and the Jets. Let me know what you guys think, though. Rounding off our list today, number 11, we have Jonathan Taylor. As long as we can keep Zach Moss off the field and not touching the ball, we should be good with Jonathan Taylor. He has been solid, but I would obviously love to see more passing work here out of JT. There are certain weeks where he's very touchdown dependent, it seems like, because he only sees like 1 or 2 targets, which makes no sense. This guy is great at catching passes out of the backfield, whereas there's other running backs in the league that get more targets where I'm just more comfortable starting him. They have a higher floor than JT does. Nonetheless, this guy is so talented, and the schedule is more than favorable rest of the season. They have the Tampa Bay Bucks. That's an all right matchup. Tennessee Titans, he can get by that matchup, just like Zach Moss did earlier on in the season. Bengals, they give up a lot of huge plays. The Steelers, not the greatest run defense. The Falcons, they have an all right defense. And then the Las Vegas Raiders, not a great defense at all. Let's hope he stays on track for these fantasy football playoffs, and the Colts can keep scoring a lot of points, and I'm feeling very confident about JT. Like I said, one of the best schedules heading into the rest of the season. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, drop a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and let me know who you're starting in week number 12. 12? I think it's okay. It's week 12. Relax. I'm losing it over here. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Good luck in week 12.